Making sure our recording has started. Okay, here we go. So yeah, welcome to our Developing an Initial Training Program Map webinar. Because we're gearing up for 2.0, we haven't had as many training courses lately, but we wanted to have an offering for you guys and a webinar about a topic that we've gotten lots of questions about and is also something to think about as we are getting ready for 2.0. We'll at the end, we'll show you kind of a sneak preview of what that'll be. But today's webinar, I know a lot of you already know me, but I am leading today's webinar. My name is Jessie Reisinger. I represent our customer success department here at QTS. And with that, helping people getting up and running with the software. Oh, and I think my screen is paused. One moment. Oh, technology. Okay, there we go. So helping people getting up and running with the software, working with people on PER5 compliance, and then also doing different training courses and webinars we offer here at QTS. And I just celebrated my 5-year anniversary the other day. Time really flies. So we're using GoToTraining with this webinar for today. I know that a lot of you already have experience with GoToTraining. What I want to point out though, we have a few materials associated with this webinar. If you go to the paperclip paper icon, you'll be able to download, there's a couple sample training maps for you. We'll be looking at those. There's also a copy of these slides and also a sample course design specification. We also have a document, some guidelines, tips, and tricks for putting together training maps. All of this will be available on our website. So we're going to be recording, putting this recording video on the website as well as all of the materials. Oh, and if you don't see anything in the materials section, yeah, we'll have that up on the website in the webinars tab when you log in. So we'll make sure to get those resources for you guys. And if you do, for whatever reason, still have issues with that, let us know. We'll make sure we can get that all to you. So what is our agenda for today? We're going to talk about, well, what is a training program map? And why are they helpful? Why are we having a whole topic about this? We'll talk about some example maps just to give you some inspiration and some key terminology. We'll then talk about what to think about in terms of your map's layout, sequence, common topics, as well as key questions and considerations. This whole content is really delving from our consulting team, their expertise with helping our clients um, putting together these training program maps. And we wanted to convey that information for you guys. So if you ever have to make a map of your own, you kind of know how to approach it and start it. We'll then show how does this tie into QTD. So it's great to have a map, but where does QTD come into play? And then at the very end, the last couple of minutes, I'll show you a sneak preview of what our new map feature for our deluxe users will look like in 2.0. So discussion time. Why are you here today? What are you hoping to get out of this webinar? Why did you come in for today's topic?
I know for me, building out our stuff in QTD, and we're actually trying to build out full training plans for positions, including initial training and continuing training.
Mhm. So actively working in QTD? Awesome. What else? Why are other people here today? Or what are you hoping to learn? Okay. Assess what you have. Yeah, so maybe you already have a map and you're just wanting to learn some tips of how to streamline it, improve it. Right. So what is a map? And it sounds like kind of a silly question, but when we're specifically talking about training program maps, this is the visual representation of a program. Now, we're kind of specifically focusing in on initial training programs. And what I mean by that is when you have a brand new hire. The reason why we're focusing in on that is continuing training is so variable. Year to year, it changes. It might be operators choosing what courses they need to maintain CEHs. So it's really hard to have a map. Typically, there might be an exception, but in general, it's really hard to have a map for a continuing training program. Initial training, on the other hand, is pretty stable over time, and there usually is a recommended flow because we want a new hire to acquire certain topics and knowledge before moving on to something else. So it's going to represent visually the flow of how we want somebody to go through a program. Now, these maps vary widely in scope. You could have a map that's just a three-part, 3-day onboarding map that's just showing, first week, this is what you're going to be going through. In system operations, where it might take several months to get fully released to sit the desk, that map could represent a much longer time frame. You also might have a map for um, you know desks. It could be more of a position. It could be a map that's shared across multiple positions. So maybe for all employees, this is what their new hire onboarding week one is going to be, a map for that. So just knowing that you can really have creativity there, just depending on your business needs. So the poll feature here, for whatever reason, is not working. So just show of hands, clicking on the little hand button, how many of you already have a map or some type of visual representation of your training program? Okay, see a few hands. And it's totally okay if you don't. And hopefully after today's webinar, we're just going to give you incentive to want to make a map and why it's so important to do so. So first off, well, we talked about, well, what is a map? That visual representation of the training. It's a roadmap for how somebody's going to go through their training. Why is this so helpful? There's a lot of reasons. First, it helps you further structure and sequence your training program. Now, you might already have this represented in a document somewhere. Typically, though, when you just have it in a big document, it's a little harder to wrap structure around it in the proper sequence. So we want to do that, and it's a lot easier when we have a map that has arrows and colors and legends. It's also really useful too, to keep trainees and trainers focused on what's important to learn and how to track that. Um, Back when pre-COVID, when we would go on site for different clients, the one utility I went to, they actually printed out the trainee's map big, put it on the wall, and then as the trainee was going through, they would kind of mark off with the marker which boxes were completed. At the very end of today, I'll show you how that's going to happen. You can do that digitally when 2.0 comes out, which will be pretty neat for our deluxe users. But it keeps people focused really on, okay, what are the key elements we need to know to get through our initial training program? It also just aids in better comprehension of the program's requirements. Visually, it's a lot easier just to see with these boxes and arrows what I need to do to become at a high level, get through and be ready to perform my job. We also can get that zoomed out view of the program. So like I said, you might have a document that outlines all the different things of a program, but it can be kind of overwhelming for a trainee to read it all as a big book or manual. So just having a high level one pager that shows us at a high level what this program is about is really useful for comprehension. It also shows the relationships between courses. Using our colors, our arrows, our module groupings, we can see what courses are prerequisites, what are my fundamentals, where does OJT come into play, how do these different topics build off of one another. It's also a graphic organizer. So we know that's important just when we're having our individual training classes we're developing, but at the program level, we want to break it down into manageable components. So by clustering things, using arrows, showing what order to do things in can make it less overwhelming. Lastly, we're building that consensus and alignment or shared mental model of what this program is. So having that high level view, everybody can kind of be on the same page about how's this program supposed to go. Bringing in kind of our brain science, adult learning theory also is more argument for why having that visual representation of your initial training program is so important. We are visual creatures and having visual representations in learning. This applies to not just our maps, but if you're designing a course, building in those visual elements, graphic organizers, really helps people better retrieve, organize, and process that information. Also, by literally segmenting and chunking the different courses together, clustering together on the map, we're also based on science. We know that we're able to better process and learn information that way as well. And then as I mentioned, the shared mental schema. What's that picture of the program? Everybody can easily see on this page visually how the program is supposed to flow and function. So, examples. The tips that we're going to give is how our team approaches designing maps. However, you really can have different ways of putting together a map, whatever makes most sense for your organization and how you want to best communicate it to your new hires. I'm going to show you two examples. These are real life examples that are scrubbed, so we just use the word PowerCo instead of the real company name. But I'll show you these two examples just to give you some inspiration for your own maps. Both are equally right, and whatever just makes most sense for your program. So here's a map. This is for a system operator position, transmission system operator. Here we are seeing courses on the map represented by boxes. And related courses are going to be clustered together under a module. So for example, we have overview, module 1, overview of the PowerCo system operator position. And then each box underneath that are different courses underneath this section. So the module title is not its own course, but it's really a title for that cluster of courses underneath it. Each box on the map, and we'll talk about this later, but each box might have multiple methods in it. In this case, this was section 1 here is self-study. So the trainee was going to, on their own, review some PowerPoint content. And then section 2, electric power fundamentals. This is classroom training. So these are all different courses that they would attend. As you could see by the arrows, they can take sections 1 and 2 at the same time. So the arrows are indicating I can proceed with these sections at the same time before moving down to the bottom section of the map. What you'll also notice too is, and we have slides explaining this later, but at the very beginning of the map, we have a new hire skill and knowledge assessment as well as development of the IDP. So this is telling me, okay, before they begin, this is as a training department what we have to do before they start going into the actual training. And we're going to explain what both of those boxes mean. Typically what you'll see also is the second half of the map is where OJT and task qualifications come into play. The beginning half of a program is where we're giving people the skills and knowledge that they need before they even begin the task training. We're wanting them to get up and running with how to use these tools, what these basic concepts are, before we even go to the job specific tasks. Now, when we get to those job specific tasks, we like to put those numbers on our map. And we represent our tasks on the map by whatever topic it is. So if I have a task that's related to um, control center emergencies, any tasks that are control center emergency tasks, we're going to put in that box at the bottom. So this is just another way of chunking and clustering to make it easier for the trainers and the trainees. If I am just giving my trainee the whole big task list, that's pretty overwhelming. But also by doing it this way, we're saying we don't want you to learn these emergency tasks until you learn system monitoring, voltage control, all these other types of tasks before you even get to the emergency stuff towards the end. So this is one example. Another example, this is also a real life example. This one is more color coded in nature. And what they did is, because there's a lot of different CBTs, computer-based trainings, there's different one-on-one guides they're working on with trainers, there's self-study guides, they decided to get more granular with the boxes. So instead of having a box that might be a combination of self-study, OJT, task qualification, they broke it down even further. And so it might be a little hard to read on my screen, but this is one of the sample maps we have attached in the materials. What's also really important to remember, if you make a map, you want to make sure that anybody who picks it up can interpret it. And to do that, you want to make sure at the very bottom you have any type of legend or color code key. At the bottom of this one, we define all the abbreviations. So in the bottom left, we'll say EMP is the QTS employee portal. If they ever see the O3 symbol, what that means is it's one-on-one training. SSG is self-study guide. We also have a note here that anything in the purple dotted lines, the training content does not have to be delivered sequentially. So they have to complete section 4.1 before moving on to section 4.2, but I can take this in any order that I want to. We also have all of these color-coded boxes defined at the bottom. So anything that's computer-based training is going to be in green, OJT is in orange. So this is just another way that you can have a map. The still having arrows and legends to show the flow and the sequence. Any special notes or caveats you can put at the bottom. In this case, the last one we looked at was just a general system operator position. This program, they have 2 desks, so they have 1 map per desk. So this is representing their switching desk training program. So this is completed after somebody's gone through the scheduling desk training. Another thing to note before we move on, and actually I'll pull it up. We have and if you are having issues downloading the materials, this will be on the website. We have put together, in addition to these slides, a guidelines document that hopefully will open for me. And all of the tips and things that I'm discussing now are represented in this 8-page document. So we just have recommendations for tools and layouts and how to sequence things. So this is also included in the materials for you to reference after. So when we're looking at a map, terminology, usually a section, we usually color code it in blue, but that's going to refer to our grouping of courses. So it's not going to necessarily be a course in and of itself. It's just the title we're using to cluster our courses. We usually represent that by a whole number. And then underneath would be our individual modules or courses. So if we have section 3, Power Co-System Overview, each course underneath that would have, 3.1, 3.2, 3.3. You want to make sure that if you are using a map that you do have this numbering system assigned, because we'll talk about how to translate this into QTD. And Daniel's question, so yeah, there's going to be an opportunity to build a map in 2.0. So that's at the very end, I'll show you guys a preview of what that's going to look like. Right now, I'll also talk about this too. In our current version of QTD, you can set up all of these courses that we have on the map. We just don't have that visual component right now. But if you want to have your visual map digitized in 2.0, I'll show you how to do that. The webinar though today, I'll show you how some tools that we use currently to build these maps. So what are some tools that you can use to build a map? In 2.0, the visual map feature is for deluxe users only. So if you don't have deluxe, you would not have the visual map component that we're bringing out, releasing in phase 2. The tools that our team uses right now, there's Microsoft Visio. That's a tool that comes with the Microsoft software suite. You can build flowcharts and diagrams. There's also a tool, I personally have not used it, but there's LucidSpark that you can build different flowcharts and diagrams with. There's Atlassian Confluence. That's a great way to have a shared space for people to build out knowledge diagrams, things like that, and PowerPoint. I know at QTS, PowerPoint and Visio are kind of the two main things that we use. So question for you guys, have any of you used these tools for building maps? Or are there any other tools not listed here that would be useful to build a visual representation of your training programs? Okay, you guys use Visio, Excel. Yeah, Visio is super easy and fun to use because it comes with the arrows. It's really meant to build those process flow diagrams. Visio or Excel. Yeah, so the first map I showed you, that was from built in Visio, and the second one was PowerPoint. Um, it really doesn't matter the tool, just whatever makes most sense for you guys and how you want to communicate and visually represent the program. All right, so let's talk about the map layout and sequence. Of course, this is also just going to vary depending on your program, but in general, you want to make sure that everything logically groups together. So if I have a section, it might be a little hard to see here, there's section 2 here, PowerCo Control Center Tools. Everything below that should be related to my Control Center tools, which it does. So they have an introduction to print reading, communication tools, EMS and SCADA, ITOA, advanced applications. Everything under emergency operations, that section should be related to emergencies. The other thing too, try to keep the map to one page. Might take some finagling. If the map is going 2-3 pages, I would consider, okay, maybe this is really 2 desks, or what is making this map be so big? So you might want to consider, is our program too complex? How can we streamline it? The intent of a map is for it to be that visual job aid. We don't want it to be this really complex document because you're going to have your manuals, your other things that are explaining all of this. This is really just for that high level visual representation. You also want to think about what's going to be the easiest representation to help your new hires learn and understand the flow of a program. That's what it's really meant for, is how to communicate the sequence, what things can be completed concurrently, what has to be completed before something else. You also want to think about high level that the map should start out very fundamental and basic and build in complexity. So by the end of the map, that will be the most complex topics that should be building off of what somebody learned at the very beginning. And the training map, when you build it, is going to be your general training program. We're going to talk about how you can customize it and make those individual development plans, because maybe you have somebody who comes in with 20 years of experience and uh, they don't need to have fundamental courses. Oh, and Jason has a great point. It also helps communicate to leadership. So a very great way, if you're ever needing to get buy-in for your program, they're probably not going to want to read through your whole training program manual, but you could say, hey, we have our program built. Here's our map showing how our program works. That's a great point. And I think I mentioned this, but the sequence of it, you want to make sure as you're reviewing your map, whether it's an existing one or we're building it, that the skills and knowledge related to your tasks, whether that be, what is three-part communication, how to use a tool, basic voltage concepts, you want to make sure those things are covered before the on-the-job training for the task. And that's where I said that the first half of the program is going to be those fundamentals, and you shouldn't really see the OJT come in until you've had the trainees learn all the tools, the basic concepts. There's some OJT guides that I've seen that people actually put a note in the tools section that says, by the time you get to this on the job training session, you should know how to use all these tools. Now we're going to apply that for this task. So you should know how to log in to ITOA, or how to fill out a basic log entry in the logging tool, or how to access the weather plotter app. Um, Now we're going to use those things to monitor the system or to evacuate the control center. So that's something else you could take a look at if you have existing maps as well. So let's talk about a couple key things that you should consider representing on your maps. At least here at QTS, when we build maps, we always build this component into it because it's really critical. The first is the new hire skill and knowledge assessment. We usually have a box for that. What is that? What that is when you have a new person come on board, before they even begin training, you want to take a moment to review what are their existing competencies and qualifications to determine what their initial training is going to look like. It could be that you have somebody fresh off the street that they might need some extra courses. Maybe somebody is already an operator from another company, so they don't really need basic math courses or basic electricity. We could waive them from that. But we need to do this step to make sure we're delivering our training and customizing it for whoever that new hire is. It's not a one size fit all because everybody's different. Now, how do we do this? It could be simply looking at the person's resume, maybe sitting down with them, going through their resume with them to get a sense of their previous work and education. You might have a more formal interview. Maybe you have them take a test. So, the one utility I worked with, they had uh, like a written exam that they take, and based on how they do, they could get a sense of which topics they're already proficient in. Maybe they just need refresher versus which courses they need to take. Maybe you have them go through some different scenarios and conditions to see how they would respond. Whatever that looks like, having this assessment done in the beginning, most typically it is reviewing the resume and sitting down and talking to that person. But whatever it is, having that at the very beginning of your map to make sure that that step is done and carried out. So why is this so important? In your own words, why are we doing this? Why is it so important to take the time um, to assess a new hire? Any takers? Or do people think this is not necessary? Oh yeah, thanks, Aaron. Yeah, do you guys do this when you bring a new hire on board? Oh yeah, Herman, to define the appropriate training learning path. Yeah. Yes, not wasting time on things they already know. Absolutely. Me as the trainee, actually, and Daniel's point relates to that. If you have a very experienced operator coming in and you're making them take these basic math and all of that, they might view training as an unpleasant experience. They can become frustrated and like, well, it's just like a one size fits all. And similarly, yeah, if you have somebody who has not been in this industry at all and you don't do that pre-assessment and you're just throwing them in to the deep end, they can get very overwhelmed. Um, oh, and Aaron, you do a pre and post test. Yeah, that's awesome. So taking the time to do this really will impact not only their performance, but perceptions of training. And we know from research, perceptions of training matter. It really impacts how people are going to perceive future training. So, um, people, when you do refresher training, the training culture you're establishing, you want people to have a positive perception of that. Oh, yep. And Aaron says if you find someone who already knows the topics, it's great to have them help teach it back. Yeah. I think getting those more experienced people involved with helping other less experienced people is super important. So, what does this look like on the map? We usually just have this at the very, very beginning of a map. We'll just put a box there, and that's where the map starts. You start by doing that new hire skill and knowledge diagnostic assessment. So pretty much all the maps that we develop, they all have that in common. We're going to have that as our starting point. Next, once we do that, that will inform our development of the individual development plan. And this is kind of, you'll start to see how QTD comes into play. But what we can do is then determine, all right, what am I waiving somebody from? What are maybe some extra courses I want them to take? You might have a map for a lead system operator position. So maybe they're already a system operator, but you have a separate kind of training you're wanting them to do. Maybe there's some one person who you're going to have go through that LSO training program, but you want them to take a leadership class or a leadership communication class. You can add that to their course, even if it's not technically on the training map. So where in QTD could you go to view somebody's IDP? Where's that IDP tab in QTD? What window? Yeah, employees. Absolutely. So yeah, this is where you can then start customizing based on that map. And does anybody know where we can generate the actual IDP report? What window menu at the very top? So it's actually employee training. Under that dropdown, you'll be able to generate employee-specific reports. But that's what this step means. Now, usually you want to have that process in place of, okay, well, based on that new hire skill and knowledge assessment, how are we determining which courses to be waived, making sure that you go into QTD to do that. And we're going to talk about QTD more in a few minutes. But that's what this step represents. We did that assessment. Which courses do I want to make sure that they're enrolled in versus what can I waive them from? We're developing that customized training plan. So same thing with our new hire skill knowledge assessments. Pretty much all the maps that we develop, they all have this in common, the development of the IDP. So before the new hire begins training, we have a hexagon symbol representing the IDP development. We're going to make sure that the trainee gets that. So before they even go into training, they know what they're going to be taking versus not having to take. The other thing you want to think about on the map, where do assessments fit in? Now, you might have for a given individual course, there's going to be tests. But when I'm talking about assessments, I'm talking things like the NERC exam, the final oral board, the final qualification, those big um, assessment checkpoints throughout the map um, to determine readiness for the next step. So different from an individual like course quiz or test. So you want to determine as a department, all right, at what point do we want to make sure that they're qualified or they pass the NERC certification, they got their PJM certification. Some some maps I've seen, they have it right at the very beginning and they just say, must happen within 6 months. Some people have just a box at the end and just say you have to get it at some point before you begin on the job training. So thinking about, all right, how do we want to visually represent the certification boxes on the map? In general, though, most time I'll see if you're investing a lot of time and energy in a trainee, we want to make sure that they're going to be successful. So a lot of times programs will require the certifications to be passed earlier on before you invest too much time in OJT and task qualification. Oh, do you set up those assessments as individual ILAs, or how do you recommend? So usually that's a great question. Usually the NERC certification, like as we have a box right here for that, we usually don't set those up as its own ILA. The only time I do see that set up as an ILA, like maybe you might have a box on your map that's called like NERC certification prep. I might have that as its own ILA, and maybe you're sending people to go through HSI SOS's program, all those courses. You can have a placeholder box on the map and in an ILA and QTD representing that. So then when they're done with that and they take the exam, you sign them off that way. So it's up to you. There's no, it's not like you have to have it set up as a box. Of course, though, if they do get their NERC certification, we want to make sure that that information is in QTD. But yeah, as you could see here, some other boxes, like they have a box kind of representing they need to have those final sign-offs all completed at this point before the oral board and simulation. And then we usually have another little hexagon symbol at the end showing, that's the stop point, the stopping point saying they are now a qualified SO. So thinking about what you want your different colors and symbols and shapes to look like on the map, that all communicates your assessments versus what training modalities you're using versus the flow and sequence. So here's just another example of that, but something else to think about. But I would absolutely make sure if you do have like a big assessment before they can move on to the next phase or a final oral board, have that as a box on the map so the trainee knows where that fits in, where it's coming. Thinking about the scope of the map, and these are conversations that you just have as a training department as you're building it or evaluating your maps. So are we going to have it for a specific position or a desk? Is it going to be more of a generic department thing that multiple positions go through this map? Um, do we have courses that are maybe more onboarding types of things through HR? Are there courses that have to be completed before they move on to something else, or can they take these at the same time before moving on to a new topic? The second map example shows in the purple dotted line around it. It was saying basically this section, all these different courses, you could complete them in any order, but then you have to have that whole chunk done before moving on. Is there anything that's going to be required versus optional? Most maps, it's all required, unless people are waived from something, and you could say, well, you're waived from it, but if you wanted to take it as a refresher, it's optional for you. Other considerations. How do you know when the map needs to be updated? Who's going to update it? Now, this is something, if you have that visual map, you need to review at a minimum every year for PER5 compliance. So pull out a copy of the map, take a look at it as you're doing your annual reviews. Does it still make sense? Do we need to combine or add courses? Typically, maps are pretty stable unless you are removing or adding courses. But thinking about, all right, how are we going to represent OJT and task qualifications? This map, the first sample, it just kind of has the task numbers. Sample number 2 I showed you specifically says this is where you're going to do the OJT for the task. This is where you're doing the task qualifications. So thinking about how specific you want to get there. What can be taken concurrently and what modes of instruction are you going to use. The second sample was very specific in color coding, so the trainee knew this is a CBT versus this is a one-on-one versus task qualification. And do we need any keys or legends to make notes to better communicate the flow of the map? Now, for those of you that do not have a map right now and you're like, oh, how the heck do we get started? First, just take a step back, think about, well, what is the position or the desk or department we're making a map for? So think of your ADDIE process. Start with that analysis. Take a step back and think, what's it for? Then think about, all right, who needs to be involved or give input on this process? Um, can you, even if you are the only training person or administrator, maybe pull in a somebody who just went through initial training or an experienced operator, get their advice about what this map should look like. And I recommend start with the first day or the first week. What does that look like? So start with that, like when they first come on board, is there any HR onboarding courses they have to do? Um, are there any vendor trainings you're sending them to? Start with that first day, that first week. And then building off of those fundamentals, um, that makes it a lot more manageable. And also too, when you have that job task list, take a look at that and the topics that the duty areas that you have for your task list. Most likely that'll probably inform what sections or groupings on the map you should have. So you could use that as a source of inspiration too. So how does QTD fit into this? So you can still, as you can see right now, our consulting team, we're using Visio, PowerPoint to build the visual maps, but we still want to translate that into QTD. So in Legacy QTD, this current version, you can, or ideally should, have each box on your training map represented as a course. A box could be a field trip, it could be OJT, but thinking about, all right, what am I wanting to enroll a student in, track it with the completion and all of that, and have on their IDP. Now, Daniel asked, well, does the NERC certification, does that have to be its own ILA? That's up to you. But you can get pretty creative here, but you want to make sure that, at least in my opinion, you want to make sure that the numbering, the naming system that you're putting into QTD directly matches your map. It's going to make it so much easier for your new hires, your trainers, whoever's going into QTD, to manage it if it matches up. And if you do need to, let's just say we're updating the course, we're making it classroom to computer-based training, or we're changing out the objectives, similar to what we recommend for all your other courses, make a copy of it and then just call that like version 2 or something like that, and make the older version inactive. But having it as its own little provider will help you keep track of that. Now, in this case, it's the company specific initial training. You might have some courses that are in your initial training that are from other vendors. We'd still want to keep them under those providers. But what you can do is, and I'll come back to that slide in a moment, but what you can do then is, when you have all those different courses set up, go into your program window and drag and drop all those courses from your company specific provider or other vendors and bundle a formal training program. So why is this useful to set up, translate that visual map into QTD like this? Why would I take the time to set up these courses? Yep, you can assign the content. Yeah, especially if you have some computer-based trainings you made, you would need to set it up as a course in QTD to push that out to EMP. Why else are we bothering setting this up in here? Why not just give the trainee a copy of the map? Oh, I lost my chat window. There we go. Oh, maintain a repository of training. Yeah, we can easily schedule, enroll people, track completions. Also, if I set each of these boxes up as a if I set up each of these boxes as a course, we can fill out all of those tabs in our ILA window to create a course design specification. There's a sample course design specification in the materials attached. And what this is really a blueprint or a lesson plan. Now, if you are a CEH provider, you're required to fill this all out to apply to SOCED, but we do this for our initial training courses, and we can really put in all these great instructions and information about what each box means and how it's carried out. So we can then print this off, give it to my trainer so they know how to run the course, but also the trainee. Of course, we love our good visual representation of the map, but just the map alone, I might be looking at that box and say, okay, 4.2 SCADA. No idea how am I supposed to get that done? I don't really know what's all involved there. So by setting these courses up into QTD, we can build out the not only track completions, but put in all that great information for knowledge transfer about what those boxes mean. So why is this useful, or do any of you do this right now with QTD? Do any of you kind of build out these training plans, course design specifications for your initial training programs?
So this was actually something I wanted to bring up during the next office hours, but I can bring it up now. So we've been building out the ILAs and being very, very detailed in the segment content of how the trainer should be providing it, what sort of things they need to do, what sort of questions to ask. But then when we go into EMP, none of that carries through. So I'm trying to figure out what's the best way to do that.
Yeah, so currently that's a limitation of EMP. Like to use this report, you do have to generate it from QTD. That is though changing for 2.0, where in EMP they're going to be able to view this full course design specification.
So based on that, should I leave it in the segment content at this time?
Yeah. I definitely would keep it where it is. And yeah, for now you could still generate your course design specification report, but yeah, because it's going to still carry over to 2.0 and then it'll flow through to EMP.
Okay, thank you.
All right, and given the time, I want to make sure I show 2.0. So the I'm going to open up my sample Figma, and the caveat I'm going to give is, so this is 2.0 is our revamp of the software. We're moving to a browser-based version of the application. It's going to be modern and updated. And as I'm talking, I'm going to switch over. We are releasing it in phases. So the core features that like people absolutely need, that's coming out in phase 1, which is in just a few weeks. And if you want to schedule a migration date, it's not going to automatically convert because some people are going through audits, aren't ready to transfer over yet. If, though, you are wanting to get migrated and set a date, reach out to our support team and we'll work with you on that because we're individually scheduling that with everybody. Phase 2, though, which is coming out later in the summer, will include this visual training map feature. So as I was showing you, we have, I'm very bad at multitasking, so I'm clicking my link to have that open. In QTD, we can represent and translate our map still by setting up those courses, bundling it together in our program, but we don't have that visual component. We're using Visio, PowerPoint to build out those elements. But what we're going to be seeing in 2.0 is for deluxe users, so it's available for deluxe. Let me pause my screen share. And this is just a Figma mockup, so there might be subtle changes when it comes out. But to give you guys just get excited for it, for deluxe users, you're going to be able to actually build in your visual training map, what we've been talking about this whole time, into QTD. The benefit here too, not only will it live in the QTD, but if I have a new hire, we can then have their own custom map, and they'll be able to see, we'll be able to see their progress on each box digitally, and it will update based on the items that are documented as completed. So here, I'm just going to click through some of these screenshots to give you a taste of what's to come. But we can select our position, and then for each box say, all right, is this an assessment box? Is this a certification? Is it a course, an IDP development? We can add in details, and this is directly tied into the courses that you guys will set up in your courses window. We can also add in pictures, and then in this case, it's showing how we're going to be formally setting it up as a program. So a lot of the same functionality you notice, where we're going to still be able to set up a program, assign version numbers and end dates. They're just building in more things such as cover photos, descriptions. QTD is also moving towards, as you could see, they're getting rid of kind of that right click, and it's going to be a lot of fly-in windows. What you'll also be able to do is bulk select and manage your courses that way. So right now, if I wanted to add a course to a program, I have to individually drag and drop it. Here, though, we can bulk select. We can custom create assessments and quizzes. They're building in, right now, all of our testing capabilities are just written tests. They're building the option if you want to track uh, some type of oral board or final performance demonstration, you can build that into here as well. So I'm going to click through to see if I can get back to the visual map. So yeah, it's something we're super, super excited about. It's going to be a lot more advanced. This is going to be available in phase 2. Now, actually, this screen right here that you're seeing, this is our updated task window screen. This will be available in phase 1. So it's more of the additional enhancements of the software coming in phase 2, but all of the critical elements you're going to need are will be phase 1. And yeah, I'm seeing if I can get back to the map. So these, of course, are all the mock-ups for uh, for the training map feature. So yeah, I just wanted to give you guys a taste of what that'll look like. I'm not the best at navigating this Figma page. Oh, here we go. So yeah, there'll be a fun visual component here. So with that, the last couple minutes we have, are there any questions or any comments or anything we can talk about the last couple minutes we have? And while you guys are thinking, we'll make sure to post this recording, the slides, all the material attachments on our website, so you can refer to that after. But I guess the take home I want to say is thinking about how to visually represent your program, especially as we are moving into 2.0, really beneficial for your trainees for a lot of reasons, um, and they're actually kind of fun to put together. Of course, you're welcome. Yeah, and hopefully some of this was helpful for you, or just new things to think about. Um, and yeah, we're excited about 2.0 coming out soon in a few weeks. Um, Thanks everybody for chiming in. And yeah, we have a couple minutes left, so I'll stick around if anybody has any questions or comments. But I appreciate you all for joining today for this webinar, and hopefully you have a great rest of your week. Thanks, Daniel. Thanks, everybody.